I'm Margaret Holloway, a 73-year-old widow living in a small adobe-style home on the quiet edges of Santa Fe, New Mexico. My days were simple and predictable. Morning tea on the porch, feeding the birds that came like clockwork, reading old mystery novels, and sometimes talking to my late husband, Henry, as if he still sat in his favorite wooden chair beside me. I spent 45 years with him, and losing him felt like someone took the roof off my life. Everything was suddenly exposed, quiet, and colder than I ever imagined. Even after 3 years without him, his presence clung to the house. The faint smell of cedar from his workshop, the jacket he always forgot to put away still folded on the top shelf, and the old cell phone he used every day resting in a drawer like a time capsule. That phone had stopped charging a few days ago, and though I didn't really need it for anything, I still wanted it to work. Something about letting it die felt like letting another piece of him go. So, with a soft sigh and a slow hand, I wrapped the phone in a small cloth and placed it gently into my purse. I told myself it was just a quick task: drive to the repair shop, have them check the charging port, come back home, maybe bake cornbread for dinner. I didn't know that by stepping out of the house, by taking that phone with me, I was walking straight into a truth that had been lurking behind my back for months. I didn't know everything was about to shatter. The day was warm, the New Mexico sun spilling gold over the pavement as I drove into town. The streets were quiet, wind chimes dancing lightly on porches as I passed. My heart was steady, my mind easy, thinking only about how much Henry used to grumble about this phone freezing on him. I even smiled at the memory. But as I turned into the little strip mall where the repair shop sat, something heavy settled in my stomach. A strange nervousness. I brushed it off at first. I told myself it was nothing. Just age, just nerves, just missing him more today than usual. I had no reason to suspect danger, no reason to suspect betrayal, no reason to think that someone close to me, someone I loved, had been inside that phone long after Henry died. But sometimes, life doesn't knock on your door with warnings. Sometimes it lets you walk calmly, innocently, right up to the edge of a cliff without telling you the ground is about to give out. That day, I walked straight toward the drop. The repair shop was a small, almost cramped little place wedged between a bakery and a thrift store. A bell chimed sharply as I pushed the glass door open, and the scent of warm circuitry and dust filled the air. A young man, with a neatly trimmed beard and tired eyes, looked up from behind the counter, offering a polite nod. "Afternoon, Mum. What can I help you with today?" he asked as I walked over. I placed Henry's phone gently on the counter, telling him it wouldn't charge. He picked it up, turning it slowly in his hands, pressing the power button, then connecting it to a cable. The blue glow from the computer monitor reflected across his face as he waited for the phone to react. For a moment, everything felt normal. The hum of the printer, the faint tapping of a keyboard in the back, the scent of fresh bread drifting in from the bakery next door. Then something changed. His posture stiffened, his hand hovering over the mouse. He frowned, leaning closer to the screen, squinting at something I couldn't see. A soft, uncomfortable silence filled the room. "Is something wrong?" I asked, feeling a pinch of worry tug at my voice. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he clicked something again, his brows tightening, his breath catching ever so slightly. I watched him, confused, feeling the air around me grow denser, thick enough to press against my chest. "This phone," he finally said, his tone quieter now, "has some unusual activity on it." My heart began to tap harder in my chest. Unusual activity? It was Henry's phone. My Henry. What could possibly be unusual about a man who rarely used anything but texting and calls? I stepped a little closer, trying to look at the monitor. The technician swallowed, hesitated, and his eyes flicked up to meet mine. Something in his expression, a mix of concern and something close to fear, sent a cold ripple through my spine. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping lower as if someone else might overhear us in the empty shop. "Please give me a minute. I need to check something." He clicked rapidly, scanning through logs, entries, and something that looked like connection attempts. His hands moved fast, too fast, like he was afraid of what he might find if he slowed down. I stood there, frozen, my fingers tightening around the strap of my purse. The seconds stretched long and thin like wire, and every tiny sound in the shop felt amplified. The buzzing light above us, the distant sound of a coffee machine from next door, my own breathing growing uneven. That uneasy feeling from earlier, the one I had brushed aside, returned with full force, curling into my chest like a tightening fist. Something wasn't right. Something was deeply, horribly wrong. And this young man was the first person to see it, too. He finally stopped typing. His hand slipped away from the mouse, and he exhaled a long, worried breath. Then he looked straight at me. Really looked, like someone about to reveal a truth they wished they didn't have to carry. "Ma'am?" he began, his voice quiet, careful, almost trembling. "I need you to stay calm, but you should cancel your cards and change your locks tonight." The words didn't make sense at first. They floated in the air like smoke, confusing and unreal. I blinked at him, stunned. "Change my locks?" I repeated slowly, as if maybe I'd misheard. He nodded. "Yes. Someone has been inside this phone, recently. Someone who shouldn't have been." My breath caught. Henry's phone. Someone inside it. The technician turned the screen slightly so I could see, though the numbers and graphs meant nothing to me. "Look here," he said, pointing to a series of entries. "These are remote access attempts. Multiple. Over months." My heart thudded painfully. "Remote access means someone was controlling the phone or trying to," he continued. "Tracking tools, monitoring apps. They were deleted, but not properly. This wasn't an accident or a glitch." The room began to feel smaller. The air tightened. My palms grew cold. But, but why?" I whispered. He shook his head. "I don't know who. But I can tell you this. Whoever did it, they had physical access at some point. They knew what they were doing." Physical access. My bones turned to ice. Henry's phone had been in my house, in my drawer, around my family, around my children, around Jordan, around Amelia, around anyone who visited. My voice trembled as I asked, "Are you saying someone was trying to watch me?" He hesitated. That hesitation alone felt like a blade. "Yes," he finally said. "Trying to access information connected to your accounts, your identity, your location, your—" He stopped himself. I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. My chest squeezed painfully tight. This wasn't just a broken phone. This was invasion. This was betrayal. "Ma'am," he said more firmly now, "I need you to take this seriously. Change your locks. Call your bank. Don't wait." I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself, my knees wobbling. "Do you think someone close to me did this?" His silence was louder than any answer. He didn't need to say yes. My heart said it for him. My mind was spinning so wildly that I barely remember walking out of the store. I only recall the sun hitting my face like heat from an open oven, and the air suddenly feeling too sharp to breathe. Someone had tried to get into Henry's phone. Someone had been trying to access bank accounts, personal details, things that belonged only to me. Things they shouldn't even know existed. My hands shook as I unlocked my car. I sat behind the steering wheel for nearly 5 full minutes, breathing too fast, clutching my purse like someone might reach in and snatch it. Finally, with trembling fingers, I called my bank. The automated voice droned on, each second scraping against my nerves until a representative finally answered. "Ma'am, I see several unusual login attempts on your account. she said, after checking. Did you try to access your account from Phoenix, Arizona? Or from an unrecognized Windows device? No, I whispered. My throat felt thick, dry. That wasn't me. We'll freeze everything immediately, she said gently. And please, change your passwords and notify local authorities if you feel unsafe. Unsafe. I hadn't heard that word in years. Santa Fe had always felt like a peaceful bubble, a place where people left their doors unlocked and neighbors greeted each other from across driveways. But in that moment, the world felt contaminated, violated. Someone had crossed a line I didn't even know could be crossed. As I drove home, every red light felt like an eternity, every passing car suspicious. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house looked different. Not physically, but emotionally. I stood in front of the door, staring at it, realizing for the first time in my life that I wasn't sure what or who waited behind it. Inside, the house was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked toward the bedroom drawer where Henry's phone had been. The drawer was slightly open. I froze. I never left it open. I always pressed it shut until the latch clicked. Slowly, with breath held tight in my chest, I reached out and opened it fully. Everything seemed in place. His glasses, his watch, old letters, and the charger. But the phone box looked moved, tilted, not where I remembered it. Had I touched it? Had someone else? My stomach twisted. I moved into the hallway and noticed something else. My side table drawer, also slightly open. It felt like invisible fingers were pressing against my spine. Someone had been here, or still was. I clutched the back of a chair to steady myself. There was no more denying it. The technician wasn't being dramatic. My home wasn't the safe place I thought it was. Someone had crossed into my private life, without permission. Someone who had access. Someone who knew my routine. Someone who knew where Henry's phone was kept. And worse, someone who had reason to look inside it. That evening, as the golden New Mexico sunset bled into shades of red and violet across the sky, my son Jordan stopped by unexpectedly. Normally I would have smiled, hugged him, offered him tea. But after everything I'd learned, my chest tightened the moment he walked through the door. He stepped inside casually, dropping his keys on the table like he always did. "Hey, Mum," he said, brushing dust off his jeans. "Where were you today?" I tried calling. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice even. "I took your father's phone to get it repaired." The change in his expression was so quick, so sharp, that it almost made me step back. His eyebrows lifted, then dropped. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. "Repaired? Why?" he asked, but not in the curious tone a son uses. Instead, like someone trying to calculate risk. Fear curled up inside me. I forced my voice to stay calm. "It wasn't charging." Jordan's eyes flicked toward my purse on the chair. He swallowed, hard. "Did they find anything wrong with it?" he asked, the question too specific, too intentional. A cold wave washed over me. Why would he ask that unless he already knew something was wrong? "Just some issues," I said carefully. "Why do you ask?" Jordan hesitated. That hesitation, like a crack spreading across glass, told me everything. He shrugged too casually. "Just curious. It's an old phone." But his hands were shaking. He shoved them into his pockets quickly, pretending they weren't. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. A mother knows her child's lies, even when she doesn't want to. I studied his face, the way his eyes avoided mine, the tightness in his mouth, the restless shifting of his feet. "Is something troubling you?" I asked softly. He looked up sharply. "No. Why would something be troubling me?" His tone was too sharp, too defensive. I stepped toward him, the room quiet except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. Jordan, I said gently, is there something you want to tell me? He blinked rapidly, then forced a laugh that sounded brittle. Mum, you're overthinking. I'm fine. But the fear in his eyes told a different story. He stayed only 15 minutes, restless the entire time, glancing around the house as if checking whether something was out of place. When he finally left, I stood at the window watching him walk to his car, fumbling with his keys, wiping sweat from his forehead even though the evening was cool. My hands trembled. The technician's warning echoed in my ears. Someone close, someone with physical access, someone who had reasons. And now, my own son was acting like a man with too much to hide. I didn't want to suspect him. I didn't want to believe it. But something dark and terrifying whispered through my mind. What if the danger wasn't outside my home? What if it had been sitting at my kitchen table all along? When I reached home, the front door was slightly open, as if someone had rushed out in a hurry. A chill crawled down my spine. I stepped inside slowly, the wooden floor creaking beneath my shoes, and a dead silence wrapped around me. Laura? Jamie? I called out. No answer. The silence inside that house had always made me uneasy after Richard's death, but today it carried something else. A warning, a heaviness, a sense that something had gone terribly wrong. I walked into the living room where Richard and I used to sit together every evening. The same lamp, the same old rocking chair, but on the coffee table lay a small folded note. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was Jamie's handwriting, messy, rushed, like he was scared or running away from something. It read, Mum, don't worry. I had to leave urgently. I'll be back soon. Just that. Nothing more. Jamie had never done something like this. He always told me where he was going. The uneasy chain of events was tightening. Richard's phone warning, the technician's scared expression, the advice to cancel cards and change locks. And now this. I walked to Jamie's room. His laptop was gone. A few clothes were missing. The closet door was half open like someone had pulled things in a hurry. My heart sank. I immediately called Laura. She picked up within seconds. Mum? What happened? You sound scared. I whispered. Jamie is not here. He left a note. Laura went silent for a moment, then said, Mum, he's been acting strange for weeks. He wasn't talking to me either. A shock ran through me. She continued, he's been out late, meeting people I don't know, places that didn't feel right. I felt the room spinning for a moment. After Richard died, I had held the family together as much as I could. But now I felt it slipping through my fingers. I forced myself to breathe slowly. No, Margaret. You can't break down now. Not when Jamie needs you the most. I grabbed my coat and keys. I knew where I had to go first. Richard's old garage. The only place he used to hide things when he didn't want the family to worry. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I remembered the man I had been married to for 40 years. Not fully, at least. Richard's old garage sat behind the house like a forgotten memory. The moment I opened the door, the familiar smell of rust and old oil hit me. Dust floated in the dim sunlight slipping through the cracked window. That garage used to be his comfort place, but today it felt like a vault of secrets. I walked toward the shelves where he kept wooden boxes stacked neatly, but one box stood out. It looked newer, cleaner, as if someone had touched it recently, maybe even earlier today. My heart pounded. I pulled it out, placed it on the floor, and opened it slowly. Inside were bank statements under Richard's name, but not from our bank. These were from some private account I had never seen before. And the balance, it was large, too large. My breath hitched. Richard never told me anything about this. Under the papers was a sealed envelope, with Jamie's name written on it. My fingers shook as I opened it. The letter inside was in Richard's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before his death. Jamie, If something happens and your mum finds out, use this money to protect her. Don't tell her everything. Some people are dangerous." Tears blurred my vision. Richard had been hiding something heavy, something dangerous enough that he thought it could reach his own son. I sank to the floor, clutching the letter. My phone buzzed suddenly. There was no caller ID. I answered, barely breathing. A deep, male voice said, "You don't know what your husband was involved in, Margaret. It's time to pay what he owed." My entire body froze. Before I could speak, he added, "We have Jamie. If you want him back alive, bring the money. You know where." And the call ended. I didn't move for a long time. Everything inside me collapsed. Fear, betrayal, heartbreak. But then something stronger rose inside me. A mother doesn't die when her heart breaks. She becomes dangerous. I wiped my tears, picked up the box of money, and whispered to myself, "I'm coming for you, Jamie. No matter the cost." I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. As soon as I entered, I locked the doors one by one. The house felt colder, darker, like the walls themselves were listening. Laura arrived within minutes. Her hair was messy, face pale, eyes wide with fear. I told her everything: the bank account, the letter, the phone call. She stood silent for a moment, processing it all, then said, "Mum, we have to call the police." I shook my head. "Laura, if these men are as dangerous as Richard believed, going to the police will only get Jamie hurt." She looked terrified, but nodded. I opened the box and placed the stacks of cash on the table. They sat there like bullets, heavy, cold, terrifying. "Mom, this is a lot of money," she whispered. "Yes," I said, "and it means Richard was in deep trouble." For hours, we searched through Richard's old notebooks, letters, receipts, anything that could give us a clue about the place the caller referred to. At around 3 a.m., Laura suddenly gasped, "Mom, look at this." She held an old ledger Richard kept. Several addresses were written inside, some crossed out, some marked with stars. One address had a note beside it: "Final meeting. Dangerous. Keep Jamie away." My blood ran cold. It had to be the place. Laura squeezed my hand. "We're going together?" I nodded. We packed the cash into a bag, grabbed the car keys, and stepped out into the cold, empty night. The road was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept picturing Jamie, scared, trapped, alone. I kept hearing Richard's voice, "Protect her. Some people are dangerous." The headlights carved a path through the darkness as we drove, mother and daughter side by side, heading straight into the part of Richard's life he tried so hard to hide from us. And I had no idea whether we were heading toward rescue or disaster. The address led us to an abandoned warehouse at the city's edge. The place looked dead. No lights, no cars, just the sound of dripping water echoing. Laura clutched my arm as we stepped in. The air smelled of rust and mold. Broken crates lay scattered. Our footsteps echoed like warnings. After a few minutes, a faint light flickered from a corner room. We moved slowly, silently. Suddenly, a harsh voice behind us said, "Stop right there." We froze. A tall man stepped out of the shadows, half his face hidden in darkness. He looked at me and smirked. "Margaret, took you long enough." My voice cracked. "Where is Jamie?" He pointed toward the small room. A faint metal rattling sound came from there. Chains. My heart nearly stopped. I stepped forward, but the man raised a hand. "Money first?" I handed him the bag. He took it, but something in his eyes unsettled me. Anger? Fear? Betrayal? He said, "Your husband didn't tell you anything, did he? He betrayed us. These debts were his." The ground slipped beneath me. Richard. Betrayal. Debts. Danger. Everything blurred for a moment. I whispered, "Just let my son go." He stared at me, long and cold. then finally jerked his chin toward the room. I rushed in, and there he was, Jamie, tied to a chair, terrified, but alive. I fell to my knees and held him. He sobbed into my shoulder. "Mum, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this." I held his face and said, "You're safe now. That's all that matters." We walked out of the room together, but I could feel the man's eyes burning into my back. There was something in his stare, a warning, almost a promise, that this wasn't over. But I didn't care. I had my son back. And mothers don't fear shadows when their child is in their arms. The drive back home was quiet. Too quiet. Jamie sat beside me, staring out of the window. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. Laura kept glancing at him through the rear-view mirror, her hands trembling. When we reached home, I made Jamie sit on the couch and handed him a glass of water. He took a deep breath and said, "Mum, Dad used to take me places sometimes. Secret meetings. He said it was for our future." My heart tightened. Jamie continued, "But once I overheard him arguing. He wanted out. He said he didn't want to be part of their business anymore." Suddenly, everything made sense. The money, the secrets, the fear, the mysterious death, the threatening call. Richard had gotten himself involved in something dark, and he had spent the last months of his life trying to escape it. Jamie looked at me with guilt written all over his face. I thought I could fix things after he died. I thought if I talked to them, maybe it would end. Laura sat beside him and grabbed his hand, her eyes filling with tears. "Jamie, you should have told us." He whispered, "I was scared." We all were. Laura wiped her cheeks and said firmly, "Mum, we have to go to the police. Not to run from this, but to end it." Jamie nodded. "I'm done hiding." And for the first time in months, I saw clarity in his eyes. Not fear, not confusion, clarity. The next morning, we walked into the police station together with everything: letters, statements, notebooks, the truth. The officer listened patiently and finally said, "You did the right thing." When we stepped outside, I felt a strange lightness. A weight had been lifted from my chest. Not because the danger had vanished, but because for the first time in years, the truth wasn't buried anymore. And truth, no matter how painful, always sets a family free. That night, after returning from the police station, the house felt strangely different. Not safer, just quieter, like the calm before a storm that hadn't fully passed. I made some tea, though my hands were unsteady, and placed the cups on the table for Jamie and Laura. Jamie looked exhausted, like the weight of all his secrets had finally collapsed on top of him. Laura sat closer to him than she had in months. Pain has a strange way of bringing family back together, especially when truth finally makes its way to the surface. As we sipped our tea, Jamie began to speak again, slowly, carefully, as if choosing each memory with caution. "Mum, I didn't understand everything Dad was involved in," he whispered, eyes lowered. "I just knew he owed something to dangerous people. But Dad always made me believe he had it under control." I listened without interrupting. For the first time in a long time, he looked like a child again. "There was a night," he continued, "months before he died. He told me to stay away from a man named Carter. He said if anything happened to him, I should take the money and disappear for a while." My heart twisted painfully. Richard had been preparing for disaster, even while trying to shield me. But hiding truths destroys families more than protecting them. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked softly. Jamie's voice cracked. "Because I didn't want you to think Dad was a bad man." A tear slipped down my cheek. "Your father wasn't a bad man, Jamie. He was a good man who made terrible mistakes. And that happens." He nodded, tears gathering in his eyes, and I reached for his hand. But you should have trusted me, I added gently. He swallowed hard, guilt pulling at him from every direction. I thought I could fix everything, he whispered. I thought I could make it all go away. Laura touched his arm. You don't have to fix the world alone. Not anymore. For the first time that night, Jamie's face softened. The three of us sat together in silence, grieving Richard, grieving the secrets, grieving everything we could no longer undo. Later, I walked to my bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept Richard's old watch. I held it in my hand, letting the weight settle into my palm. You should have trusted us too, I whispered into the quiet room. Outside, wind began to rattle the windows. Somewhere deep in my heart, I knew the story wasn't finished yet. The police would investigate, but dangerous people rarely vanish quietly. I climbed into bed, closed my eyes, and prayed. Prayed that the next chapter wouldn't tear my family apart again. But in my bones, I could feel it. Something was coming. The next morning began with a violent knock on the door, loud enough to jolt me upright from the little sleep I had. For a moment, I froze. Fear surged through me, cold and electric. I slowly walked toward the door, with Laura following close behind. Jamie stood in the hallway, pale and alarmed, clutching the back of a chair as if he were bracing himself. When I opened the door, 2 detectives stood there. Not the officer from yesterday. New faces, stern and unreadable. Mrs. Holloway, one of them said, we need to speak with you and your children. It's urgent. My pulse spiked. Is Jamie in trouble? I asked. The detective shook his head. No, but we received new information last night. We let them in, and they sat with us in the living room. The older detective leaned forward. The man who contacted you yesterday, the one who claimed to have your son, his name is Carter Reed. He's been under investigation for years, and last night, he disappeared. Jamie exhaled shakily. Laura looked at me, fear tightening her jaw. I stared at the detectives, confused. Disappeared? What do you mean? He vanished, the younger detective said. His warehouse was found empty. No money, no signs of struggle. Just gone. A heavy silence settled over us. My mind raced. Had he taken the money and run? Or was something else at play? Mrs. Holloway, the older detective continued, there's something you should know. Your husband, Richard, was working with us before he died. The room spun for a moment. Working with you? I whispered. Why? He never told me anything. He was providing information about Carter's operations, the detective said gently. We believe he was trying to help us shut everything down, but Carter found out. A cold wave washed over me. Are you saying Richard's death wasn't an accident? The detectives exchanged a heavy look. The older one finally said, We believe Carter arranged it. Jamie covered his mouth with his hand, horrified. Laura grabbed my shoulder. I felt something inside me shatter. Anger, grief, betrayal, all twisting into something dark and painful. So Richard died trying to protect us? I murmured. Yes, he said. And you were never supposed to get caught in the middle of this. I sat back, numb. My husband had died fighting a battle we never even knew existed. And now Carter had vanished, with the money, with the truth, with the last piece of Richard's story. Before leaving, the detective warned us, stay alert. Carter may reach out again. If he does, call us immediately. When the door closed behind them, a heavy silence filled the room. Jamie whispered, Mum, Dad died because of me, because of that money. I touched his cheek gently. No, sweetheart. He died because he loved us, because he was trying to save us. And for the first time since Richard's death, I felt not fear, but resolve. If Carter ever came back, I would not be the same fragile widow he expected. The following days were slow, tense and full of questions we didn't have answers for. Every sound outside made me jump. Every car that passed by made Jamie peek through the curtains. Laura refused to leave my side. The three of us were caught in a strange limbo, half waiting for danger to return, half praying it never would. On the fourth day, I decided to take back control of my life in the only way I could. I changed every lock in the house, installed a new security system, placed cameras in every vulnerable corner, and froze every financial account tied to Richard's name. Jamie followed me from room to room, offering help, apologizing again and again. At one point, I stopped and looked at him. "Jamie, this isn't your burden to carry alone," I said gently. "Your father made choices. I made choices. You made choices. None of us are perfect." He nodded slowly, tears lingering in his eyes. "I just want our family to be okay." I hugged him, holding him tightly. "We will be, but we'll be okay because we're facing the truth, not hiding from it anymore." Later that afternoon, I sat with Laura at the kitchen table as she helped me reset all my online accounts. "Mum," she said, hesitation in her voice, "do you think Carter will come after us again?" I took a deep breath, staring at the steam rising from my tea. "I don't know," I admitted, "but running from fear only gives it more power. And I'm done running." Laura looked at me with a kind of respect I hadn't seen in years. That night, after everyone went to bed, I walked into Richard's old garage one last time. The emptiness in that room felt different now. Not mysterious, not frightening. Just human. Painful. Complicated. And human. I touched his old workbench, the rusty tools, the boxes he left behind. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered into the darkness. There was no answer, of course, only the soft hum of the night air. Then a strange calm washed over me. Yes, Richard had lied. Yes, he had dragged us into danger. Yes, he had hidden things that should have been shared. But he also tried to protect us. He tried to fix his mistakes. And in the end, he died, trying to keep his family safe. When I left the garage and locked it behind me, I felt a shift inside, a readiness to build a new chapter, even if the past was still chasing us in shadows. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of strength return to my chest. And that was enough to keep going. The next morning began like any other, until Jamie walked into the kitchen with a look of determination in his eyes. "Mum," he said, sitting down across from me, "I want to fix things. Really fix them." I looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "I'm done hiding from what Dad got mixed up in. And I'm done hiding from my own mistakes. I want to help the police. I want to testify, give them everything I know. If Dad died trying to stop these people, then I want to finish what he started." My heart tightened in my chest. I reached across the table and took his hand. "Jamie, you don't owe the world your life. You owe yourself peace." He squeezed my fingers lightly. "This is the only way I'll ever find peace." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Laura, who had been upstairs, hurried down. We exchanged nervous glances. Fear still lived in our bones. But when I opened the door, a familiar face stood there. The older detective. His expression was serious, but softer than before. "Mrs. Holloway," he said gently, "we found something." He stepped inside and placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents, bank transfers, coded messages, signed agreements, proof, evidence. "All of this," he said quietly, "ties Carter to a network we've been trying to take down for years." Jamie leaned forward, eyes wide. "So, does this mean—" "It means your father didn't die for nothing," the detective replied. "It means we can finish this, and we'll need your help." Jamie nodded slowly, a heavy but resolute acceptance in his expression. The detective added, "We'll keep you protected, all of you." After he left, Laura hugged Jamie tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Jamie closed his eyes, like her words were giving him strength he desperately needed. That night, we sat together, mother and children, finally united not by fear, but by truth. We honored Richard. We faced the danger. We confronted the lies. And even though the future remained uncertain for the first time, we were fighting as a family, not as three broken pieces trying to survive separately. I looked at my children, their faces tired but hopeful, and whispered, "We're going to be okay." And somehow, I believed it. The following weeks were a blur of meetings with investigators, long interviews, and endless questions. Jamie shared everything he remembered, every conversation, every address, every warning Richard gave him. Laura and I stood by him through each session. The detectives assured us repeatedly that our cooperation had been the missing piece they needed. And then, one morning, the call came. Carter Reed had been arrested. Not in our city, not even in our state. He had been tracked down 3 states away, attempting to cross the border. Relief washed over me like warm sunlight after a long winter. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt like our family could breathe again. That evening, we sat together in the living room, the same place where months earlier our world had shattered. Now the air felt lighter. Jamie rested his head on the couch, finally peaceful. Laura leaned her head on my shoulder. I looked at both of them, and emotion swelled inside me. "You know," I said softly, "we didn't survive this because we were strong. We survived because we stayed together." Jamie nodded. "I wish Dad could see us now." I smiled sadly. "He sees us, sweetheart, and he's proud." The room fell quiet as the weight of everything we'd survived settled gently around us. Later that night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I stepped outside onto the porch. The sky above Santa Fe was endless, deep, dark, filled with stars that looked like tiny sparks of hope. Richard had made terrible mistakes. He had hidden truths that tore our family apart. But he had also loved us with everything he had. And in the end, he had given his life trying to protect the people he cared for most. I took a deep breath and whispered into the cool night air, "Thank you, Richard. We're safe now." A soft breeze brushed my cheek, almost like a goodbye. I closed my eyes, letting that final moment settle into my heart. Our family wasn't the same anymore. We were bruised. We were changed. But we were no longer broken. We faced the darkness. We walked through it. And we came out stronger. That is what mattered. Inside the house, I turned off the lights, ready for a new chapter. A chapter built not on secrets or fear, but on truth, forgiveness, and love. And as I closed my bedroom door, I whispered to myself a lesson I would never forget. Family doesn't stay strong because it avoids storms. It stays strong because it survives them together.